9mm versus 22 Magnum. Is 22 Magnum good enough for self-defense, being that's just a rimfire round? And what I have today is our Speer gold dot ammunition. So I brought out some 9mm to compare to the 22 Magnum. So what I got for 9mm is our 115 grain Speer gold dot. That's rated at 1210 feet per second. And then with our 22 Magnum, we have a 40 grain 22 Magnum. That is rated at 1,050 feet per second. So I'm going to use my 4-inch barrel Ruger Security 9 to test the 9mm and my 3-inch barrel Ruger LCR-X to test the 22 Magnum. And this is a 3-inch barrel and this is a 4-inch barrel. What you actually have from the bullet nose to the muzzle is about 2.8 inches and some change. With a 3-inch revolver, obviously we have 3 inches of barrel travel. So the guns are about the same overall size and barrel travel. So that's a very fair way to test these. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my real world ballistic gel test. And what I have here is 4 layers of t-shirt material followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. And this is about a half representation of the density of flesh. So if I got like 16 inches in this gel block, that's more like 8 inches on a real living target. And then what I want to do is kind of a car door simulation barrier here. So really what I want to see is how well 22 Magnum will do against a barrier. So I have 22 gauge piece of steel there, and behind that I have 3 layers of gardening trim plastic there, just to kind of simulate a very thin part of a car door to see how the 22 Magnum will do versus 9mm. So we'll do that regular test there, and then we'll do it with the barrier in the way and see how they do. And then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 9mm 115 grain jacket at hollow point. This is rated at 1210 feet per second. I believe that is through a 4-inch barrel. So let's see what I get through my 4-inch barrel. See how close I get to 1210 feet per second. Well, 41. 1221, 1224, 1246, 1245. Very good velocity overall. Now our 22 Magnum 40 grain. This is rated at 1050. This is the short barrel load, and it only comes in the short barrel load, so that's why I'm using that. And I believe that's rated through like a 2-inch barrel. So let's see what we get in our 3-inch barrel. See how close we get to 1050. 1266, 1298, 1287, 1321, 1370. Let me do another one. 1351. Yeah, so that velocity wasn't particularly consistent. We started to get a lot higher velocity at the end there. That's really interesting. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how 22 mag compares to 9mm. All right, first up, our regular real-world simulation test. 4 layers of t-shirt material followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. You gotta remember that's about a half representation of the density of flesh, so no, that's not a 3-inch actual pectoral muscle. It really compares more to like 1.5 inches of real flesh. So anything you see in there, it's going to go about half that far in a real living target. And I would like to keep these bullets within that back rib simulation without passing through, but if they do pass through, they can go upwards of 3 inches past that back rib simulation without it, me considering that to be over penetration. So let's see what we get here with our 9mm. I did put the chronograph up in front of the gel block. Hopefully I can get some reads just because of that inconsistent 22 mag velocity. So 9mm, let's see how this does. All right. And we got 1241 feet per second velocity. 22 Magnum. See how this does. About 15 feet per second. Let's go take a look. All right, so we're on the low end of that velocity there with the 22 Magnum, but even at that, you know, it did fine. And the penetration is almost identical between both of these, which is really interesting. And both of them have energy dump in the first 3-inch piece here. So really what we're seeing is we're seeing two bullets going about the same velocity, penetrating about the same. So the 22 mag in a lot of respects is about like a miniature 9mm. It's doing pretty much the same thing in this type of testing. It's just a little bit smaller bullet overall. So looking at our rib simulation here, you know, with the energy dump here, I would think they would both expand right here. And there is some level of expansion with both of them. However, our 9mm definitely makes a much larger hole than our 22 Magnum. But our 22 Magnum does look like it's expanding. So it's just like a miniature 9mm, which is just really kind of interesting and cool to see how it performs like this. So our 9mm, obviously it's going to do more damage. It's going to be a better fight stopper. The street data would show that. And what we got there is before the bullet rolled back, we got about 13.5 inches of penetration, which is really good. We have great expansion. With our 22 mag, we got about 14 inches of penetration. So very similar penetration, but a little bit more with our 22 mag. That's very interesting. So I think that hard barrier will probably change things up a little bit. So I'm really curious what we're going to get with that. So let's put on our car door simulation and see how these do like that. All right, our car door simulation barrier. So we just have 22 gauge steel followed by 3 pieces of that that trim that's for like gardening and whatnot. So it's pretty tough plastic, but it's not particularly thick. But this should do the job at mangling the bullet enough that it'll probably cause some differences. So let's see what we get here with our 9mm hard barrier test. 1241 feet per second. 22 mag. Let's see how this does. Let's go take a look. Well, I'm pretty surprised that 22 mag went as deep as it did. So interesting here. And we can see a little bit of fragmentation of that 22 mag bullet. Our 9mm is right on the edge of that gel block. So it went right along that side there. But looking at our little barrier here, yeah, that 9mm put a huge hole there. And obviously our 22 mag, it's not going to do a whole lot there. But even after that barrier, and by the way, that the velocity was 1277 feet per second with our 22 mag. So a little bit faster that time. And we'll take a look at our rib simulation. And we can see that right here, our 9mm didn't expand the way it did in our regular test. So our 22 mag didn't really change that much. And it's funny because our 22 mag, when it comes to the penetration, didn't change that much. Our 9mm, just because it didn't expand, it has that much more extra power. It went real deep. It went through our back rib simulation even. So just a little hole going through there on the edge. Not much going on with that. So we definitely over penetrated. So this would go, if you shot through a hard barrier like this would probably go clean through an average size individual, which is not a good thing really when you think about it. A regular car door probably would be a lot tougher than this, so it wouldn't probably go this far. But if you hit the thinnest part of the door, what we got with this shot is about 30 3/4 inches. So that could probably potentially pass through even on a side shot through someone. If it hit just the thoracic cavity, it would probably go straight through. And why that's a bad thing is, if, I mean, I guess if you're shooting at attackers that's in a car shooting at you and you shot back, well, you might hit the passenger and they might not be the one that's the target. So that's something to think about. Looks like the bullet rolled in and all of that the way the gold dots normally do. Now with our 22 mag, I think it did about the same thing as far as just folding in that bullet, it looks like. Energy dump with both of these is okay in this first 3-inch piece. And our 22 mag, what we got here is a total penetration of about 15 inches. So that stayed very consistent from shot to shot, as were our 9mm. Not so consistent from shot to shot. So that's eye-opening. That's interesting looking at this. So what we can say is that a 22 mag, from what I can tell, is not a bad choice. At least from a 3-inch revolver hitting, you know, about 1250 feet per second, it seems fine. 9mm is fine too most of the time, but you know, 9mm is really known to penetrate a lot when it doesn't expand, and then you're responsible for that bullet wherever it goes. So it's just something to keep in mind. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these bullets. I'm going to shoot a steel target and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a look at our bullets going through our real-world simulation. Our 9mm here and our 22 Magnum over here. So our 9mm did a lot better than our 22 Magnum. Got massive amounts of expansion, which, you know, going through a real-world simulation like that, a lot of bullets don't get that big. So that's really fantastic that it got that big. And if you look at the size of the bullets, you could probably put 4 of those 22 Magnums in the size of that 9mm. So that tells you a lot. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean it's 4 times as effective, but it's going to cut a bigger hole. You know, and this 9mm did fantastic. And a lot of people accuse me of hating on the 9mm. And that came about because I've got a lot of people that would say 9mm is just as powerful as 357 Magnum. Because back like several years ago, Mac released a video and he tested some really terrible 357 mag against 9mm, and I'm like, well, that's not quite true. And then I got this reputation of testing 9mm versus 357 Magnum, and then people saying I'm hating on the 9mm, and it's never been like that. It's an adequate cartridge. It's just that it's not the greatest cartridge, but it's an okay cartridge. And this test, yeah, the 9mm definitely is a lot more effective than our 22 mag, but our penetration with our 22 mag was really good, and you could effectively do but the same job with that. Now, going through our hard barrier, this is where things change up a lot, because our 9mm went from this really fantastic expansion down to none, as where our 22 mag, the size of the bullets are almost the same. And you know, the size of that bullet, 22 mag, isn't much different than that 9mm bullet there. So we're getting, you know, a good penetration through our hard barrier, adequate penetration with our 22 mag, and it's not severely over penetrating. That's just interesting. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, the 22 mag would be just as effective as 9mm. No. However, what I'm gonna say is I think it'd be pretty close to as effective as 9mm, and that's a lot to be said for a cartridge that has half the recoil. So that did pretty well overall. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target. This is just my practical shootability distance, so I'm just gonna get a sight picture and pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target. See if there's a big difference between the shootability of 9mm and 22 mag. So 9mm gold dot. Let's see how this does. All things considered, that shoots pretty good. Not a lot of recoil, but definitely a bit. So 22 mag. Let's see how this does. All right, way different points of impact there. Easy for that to get away from me. I think I probably shot the 9mm better, but this has like half the recoil, or probably a little bit less than that even. So let me back it up from some more distance and see how these shoot from 75 yards just for fun. All right, 75 yards from the target just for fun. So I'm going to try to fire these as slow as I can and try to make some hits with these. So let's say I get here with our gold dot 9mm from 75 yards. All right, so that's accurate ammo. The misses were definitely on me. I was pulling those shots. But overall, it's not bad at all. 22 mag. I'm not sure where these are going to shoot. I think they were shooting kind of low. Let me aim center and see where these go. I think I'm hitting. Doesn't make as loud of a ring on the steel. They'll shoot pretty good. I'll fire a few more. Case ejection is good. So most ammo doesn't shoot that good out of this revolver for me, but that gold dot shoots really, really good overall. So this is a great load. I mean, we had some inconsistent velocities with it, but you know, the shots I took are actually on the lower end side. So if you had a little more velocity, it's not going to hurt anything. So looking at this, I'm going to have to say, as a 22 Magnum, especially the 3-inch barrel or greater, good enough for self-defense. I'm going to say with the rate ammo, absolutely. We did everything that the 9mm did with this, pretty much, except for get excessive overpenetration, which is not necessarily a positive thing. So this seemed like an ideal cartridge, an ideal caliber for self-defense. It's doing everything I want. It's very accurate and easy to shoot. And that's the thing about this. I mean, very low recoil here. Less than a 380. Less than most cartridges. It just shoots really well. It's barely more than a 22 long rifle. Shoots fantastic. And it's, you know, when we talk about like 22 long rifle, that gets questionable, and that's because people think that it's all about energy, and it's not. You know, 22 long rifles, a heeled bullet is a very soft lead bullet. It's pretty much never jacketed except for that new uppercut, and when they do that, it brings the power level down so low you can't get expansion, you can't get penetration through barriers. And then when you shoot regular 22 long rifle ammo, you can't get penetration through barriers because the bullet is so soft it deforms. But 22 mag is a completely different animal. You know, people say, well, it's 22, energy's energy. It's not. 22 Magnum uses actual jacketed bullets, and it has the power to make those bullets perform. So it can match a lot of centerfire cartridges. Now the 9mm, obviously the 9mm thing's fantastic performance overall. It's just not that good through hard barriers. I mean, it is, but it isn't. I mean, it did a lot better through a hard barrier. Better is going through, you know, more than what you want, but at the same time, this just put the bullets where we wanted them to go. So I would say 22 mag is great for defense. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like. Thanks for watching.